Somewhere in your life, there is a person who takes and does not give back. You have probably already thought of them. They are charming when they need something. They apologize beautifully and change nothing. They leave every arrangement holding slightly more than they started with, and somehow you are the one who ends up apologizing. And at some point you ask the obvious question, how does someone like that still exist? If everybody could see through them, they would starve. So why are there always a few in every workplace, every family, every village that has ever existed? You probably assume they are broken, a glitch. Something went wrong in the wiring or in childhood and produced a person who cannot cooperate the way the rest of us do. But the real answer is far stranger. They are not a glitch in the system. They are a permanent feature of it. Mathematics predicts them, biology produces them, and the reason they exist is the same reason your own trust exists. You cannot have one without the other. Let me show you why. Start with a question that troubled biologists for over a century. Why is anything nice to anything? Evolution is supposed to be ruthless. The organism that grabs the most and gives the least should win. And yet the natural world is full of animals helping each other, sharing food, grooming, warning, cooperating at real cost to themselves. For a long time, that looked like a contradiction at the heart of the theory. The biologist Robert Trivers proposed a solution in the 1970s that resolved it. He called it reciprocal altruism, and the logic is simple enough to hold in your head. If I help you today at a small cost to me, and you help me next month at a small cost to you, we both come out ahead. Two cooperators together will beat two loners every time. Cooperation is not soft. It is profitable. But Trivers saw the crack in it immediately. That whole arrangement only works if you actually pay me back. Because consider what happens to someone who takes the help and never returns it. They get the benefit without the cost. In pure accounting terms, that person does better than everyone playing fair. Every act of generosity in the world is a door left unlocked, and the moment cooperation appears, so does the opportunity to exploit it. The cheat is not an outsider breaking into the system. The cheat is created by the system, the instant the system begins to work. So why doesn't cheating simply take over? The political scientist Robert Axelrod tested that question in a way nobody had before. In 1980, he ran a tournament, and instead of using animals, he used strategies. He invited researchers to submit computer programs that would play a simple cooperation game against each other, over and over, thousands of rounds. Each round, a program could cooperate or defect. Mutual cooperation paid both. Defecting on a cooperator paid the defector handsomely and punished the trusting one. Some entries were elaborate. Some were vicious, defecting constantly, exploiting anything soft. The winner was 4 lines long. It was called tit for tat, and its rule was almost childishly simple. Cooperate on the first move. After that, do whatever the other player just did. That is the whole strategy. Be nice first. Retaliate if crossed. Forgive immediately when they return to cooperating. The pure exploiters did brilliantly at first, harvesting the naive. And then they ran out of victims, met each other, and destroyed each other. Meanwhile, the cooperators, having learned to punish, quietly accumulated. Axelrod looked at what the successful strategies had in common, and the pattern was consistent. The high scorers were never the first to defect. They responded when crossed rather than absorbing it. They forgave rather than holding a grudge indefinitely. And crucially, they were predictable, so that other players could recognize them and cooperate confidently. That last one is easy to overlook, and it matters enormously. A strategy that is clever and unreadable makes everyone around it cautious, and caution kills cooperation. Being straightforward was not a moral flourish, it was mechanically advantageous. Now here's the finding that answers our question, and it is not the one people usually remember. Cheating did not go extinct. It settled. When you run these systems long enough, the exploiters do not vanish, and they do not take over. They stabilize at a small percentage. And the reason is a principle called frequency dependence, which is worth understanding because it explains almost everything about the person you were thinking of at the start. The value of being a cheat depends entirely on how many cheats there are. If almost everyone is trusting, being an exploiter is spectacular. Endless open doors, no one expecting betrayal, a whole population of people who assume good faith. That is an extraordinary environment for a taker. But every additional exploiter poisons that environment. Trust drops. People start checking. Reputations start traveling. And when exploiters become common, they mostly encounter each other and the strategy collapses. Two takers in a room have nothing to take. So the payoff for cheating falls as cheating becomes more common, which means there is a level, always fairly low, where being a cheat is exactly as good as being honest and no better. And a population will sit at that level forever. You can watch the same logic anywhere you look. A market where most sellers are honest is a wonderful place to be a fraud because nobody inspects anything. A market where everyone is a fraud is worthless to defraud because nobody buys. The fraction of fraudsters drifts toward the number where fraud stops paying better than honesty, and then it stops moving. Nature runs this everywhere. There are fish that clean parasites off larger fish, an honest service both sides benefit from. And there are other fish that mimic the cleaners exactly, get invited in close, and take a bite of the customer instead. The mimics are always the minority. They have to be. If they became common, the big fish would stop trusting cleaners at all, and the mimics would lose the very thing that lets them work. Not because anyone chose it, because it is a stable point. In the same way, a marble at the bottom of a bowl is at a stable point. Push it either way, and it rolls back. That is why they exist, not as damage, as an equilibrium. The psychologist Delroy Paulhus, working with Kevin Williams, gave the modern research a name for the cluster of traits involved: the dark triad, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. What their work established is that these are not simply diseases. They are measurable dimensions that everyone sits somewhere on, and the people at the high end are not malfunctioning. They're running a different strategy, and in the right conditions, it works. It is worth sitting with that word, everyone. These are not two categories of human being, the normal and the dark. They are sliders, and you have them. You have felt the pull to manage how you appear, to leave out the detail that would cost you, to be warmer to the person who is useful. That is the same machinery, turned low. Which means the difference between you and the person you are thinking of is not a difference in kind. It is a difference in setting, and in how often the setting gets used. That is less comfortable than a story where they are a separate species. It is also almost certainly true, which is genuinely unsettling. So let me be careful here. None of this makes exploitation acceptable. An explanation is not a permission slip. Understanding why lightning strikes does not mean you should stand in a field holding a rod. The person who took from you was still responsible for taking. But it does change what you're looking at. You were not unlucky, and you were not uniquely stupid. You encountered a strategy that has existed for as long as cooperation has, because cooperation is what makes it possible. Now step back into your own life, because this is where it becomes useful. Notice what the environment does to the numbers. The exploiter strategy depends on one condition above all: not being found out. It needs anonymity, or fresh victims, or a way to move on before reputation catches up. In a village of 30 people, that is nearly impossible. Everyone knows who took and never gave. The strategy dies fast in a small, watchful group. Now look at the world you actually live in. Cities of millions. Jobs you leave after 2 years. Dating apps with endless new strangers. Comment sections with no names attached. We have built, without meaning to, close to a perfect environment for the strategy. Not because people got worse, but because the thing that used to restrain them, being known over time, has largely dissolved. Think about what reputation used to be. In a small group, it was automatic and inescapable. You did not have to investigate anyone, because everyone had watched everyone else for decades. A person's history walked into the room ahead of them. There was no version of you available that the group had not already seen. Now, reputation is something you have to actively construct, and it barely travels. The person who behaved badly in one company arrives at the next one with a clean slate. The one who drained a friendship moves to a different city and starts fresh. Every boundary they cross resets the counter. Your ancestors were protected by a small world. You are not protected by anything except your own attention. That is not a reason for despair. It is a reason to understand what actually protects you. Because look again at what won Axelrod's tournament, not suspicion. The winning strategy started by cooperating with everyone. The trusting default was correct. In a world where most people reciprocate, Opening with generosity is simply the higher earning move, and a person who trusts nobody spends their life paying the cost of defense for a threat that mostly is not there. What tit for tat added was not distrust, it was memory and a willingness to respond. That is the whole lesson, and it is smaller than you would expect. Keep being generous first, because you will be right most of the time. But notice the pattern when someone takes and does not return, and let that change what you offer them. Not with hatred, with arithmetic. And forgive quickly when someone genuinely corrects course, because the version of the strategy that never forgives loses too. Permanent grudges cost more than they save. Somewhere in your life, there is a person who takes and does not give back. They are not a mystery, and they are not a flaw in the world. They are the shadow that cooperation casts. The proof that most people, most of the time, can be trusted. Because if they could not, that person would have nothing to take.